Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody, and welcome to this webinar with my friend and colleague, Sunny Strasberg. I'm very excited to be able to introduce her to you all. I'm going to share just a little bit of a very brief kind of formal bio of Sunny so you're familiar with her background, but then I want to talk more about who Sunny is as a human being and an amazing practitioner and clinician and transformer in the world. So Steiny Strasberg, LMFT, is a psychedelic entrepreneur, licensed psychotherapist, author, consultant, and educator specializing in internal family systems, or IFS, and archetypal psychology. She's a certified practitioner in EMDR and psychedelic-assisted therapies. She holds a graduate certification in psychedelic-assisted therapy and research from CIIS, the California Institute of Integral Studies. With expertise in ketamine, MDMA, and psilocybin-assisted psychotherapies, she has utilized her robust skills to train hundreds of clinicians. With Dr. Richard Schwartz, the founder of Internal Family Systems, Sunny hosts transformative retreats employing novel principles and methodologies that blend therapeutic practices with psychedelics. She has authored the insightful book, The Therapeutic Approach, Psychedelic Therapy, Perspective, Preparation, and Practice, encapsulating her extensive experience as an entrepreneur, psychotherapist, and educator. A prolific speaker, she has graced stages at numerous esteemed conferences such as Psychedelic Science 2023, South by Southwest 2023, and Expanded States of Consciousness Worldwide Summit in 2021, the EMDRIA Worldwide Virtual Conference, Journey Clinical, Embodied Training, Andrea UK, and Boston Trauma Conference, sharing her innovative perspectives and experiences in the therapeutic field. Her website is sunnystrasbergtherapy.com. So I want to talk a little bit about who Sunny is as a human being. I've had the privilege to be in retreat with Sunny twice. First, I did a ketamine-assisted psychotherapy retreat, integrating ketamine-assisted psychotherapy and internal family systems with Sunny and Dick Schwartz, the founder of IFS. That was just an amazing, life-changing experience, and just incredible work to see Sunny and Dick Schwartz work together in this not only impeccably professional and clinical manner, but really in a truly shamanic, transformational manner. I also had the privilege of being in another retreat with Sunny in Costa Rica, where the first part of the retreat was, again, integrating ketamine-assisted psychotherapy journeys with internal family systems, and with Sunny's focus on archetypal psychology, her kind of archetypal Jungian depth psychology background. And then we had the second half of the retreat was with ayahuasca journeys. So again, really profound retreat in Costa Rica that I was able to be at with my wife, Sophia, and it was extraordinarily profound. And the work Sunny is doing in the world, not only is she a consummate practitioner, a clinician with years and years and years of client experience, and just has just really just incredible ethical foundations and knowledge of how to provide therapy in the most professional and ethically empowering, impeccable ways. She's just so schooled and so experienced. But her work today, she's also working with really high impact leaders and getting high impact leaders, the people that are really impacting our world, that are involved in driving the whole artificial intelligence revolution, and these kind of high impact leaders, getting them in these transformational spaces to try to, shift who they're being a little bit, because they're having a big impact on the world. And a lot of them are kind of, brilliant, but maybe not so evolved emotionally and spiritually. And Sunny's really focused on trying to transform a generation of leadership that's having such an impact on our world. Just recently, and I'm going to ask Sunny to maybe just share this briefly as I introduce her, just recently led a retreat for 20 veterans, I think. And again, that's an example of the really deep work you're doing and the transformational nature of it, and really bringing it to where this work of shifting consciousness is most needed. So I want to introduce my friend and colleague, Sunny Strasberg, and please say hi and maybe tell us a little bit about the work you're doing right now before jumping into this webinar on how we help clients take mystical experiences and really put them into real change in their lives.
Wow, what an introduction, Fleet. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here, everyone. It's really an honor. Um, yeah, so I've had an interesting year. I recently, one of my clients donated funds to bring 20 veterans to a retreat in Point Reyes, California. And it was really impactful. It was such a confirmation about the power of depth psychology and IFS working with ketamine. I was really impressed with it and doing a lot of work with moral injury and utilizing IFS tools to help people deal with moral injury that they'd been carrying for decades. So that was inspirational for sure. And I've also been working with leaders. I'm working on a project right now, doing a series of retreats for people that are in different spheres of influence within the meta crisis. So we're looking at working with people that are in AI and technology and politics and media. And I've been a trauma therapist for 2 decades and really felt like I was just cleaning up emotional trauma one by one. And I started thinking, wow, how can I have a bigger impact in the world and help more people? And I thought about going to where the source of the trauma was coming from. And in a more systems approach, looking at people who influence the rest of the world and seeing if I could help them unburden trauma using internal family systems to help shift the world a little bit and have them create their influence from a place of compassion and connection, which has been really exciting. And then, of course, I still am working with clients like veterans and a broad spectrum of people, which is very gratifying and exciting for me. So I'll go ahead and if we're ready to go, should I go ahead and
Please
get
jump right
into
in,
it?
Sonny. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay.
Welcome. And this is gonna be great. So everybody really take your seat and prepare to just learn a lot here. So take it away.
Thanks, Fleet. Um, okay, I wanted to correct Fleet too because he said Sunny Strasberg Therapy and the website is actually just sunnystrasberg.com. So you can see that at the bottom. So this is the larger course through Academy of Therapy Wisdom is called Unlocking the Therapeutic Approach, Mastering Psychedelic Therapy for Profound Healing. And this webinar is a topic that I'm very, very passionate about, Beyond the Journey, how to help clients translate mystical experiences into lasting change. My disclaimer is that it's for educational purposes only. This isn't medical advice. We're just talking about how to provide the best integration for our clients today. Fleet gave me a glowing, wonderful introduction. Thank you for that, Fleet. And so, what are we going to talk about today? Today, we're going to cover identifying the 3 biggest mistakes clients make when trying to integrate psychedelic experiences. I would add clients and clinicians make. Recognize how backlash and bypassing can derail integration and how to course correct. I'm going to introduce 3 practical exercises and help you understand the therapist or the facilitator's role in bridging mystical experiences with everyday clinical practice. And what I'm going to start with today is a little bit unusual. I'm going to offer you a brief meditation, but this is something that I use at every retreat, every gathering that I do. And it's based on internal family systems. So this is both experiential. I'm going to invite you to experience this brief meditation, and also to kind of put on your facilitator hat and think about how to offer this to your clients. And we'll go into this in more detail, but this is really welcoming the space. And I do this before any the actual medicine day, but I also offer this in integration because it helps my clients come back to their experience during the journey. So just get comfortable. And if you're driving, you might be listening to this when you're driving or when you're walking or something. So just make sure that you're safe, in a place that you're safe. And you just reflect. If you're driving or something, just allow yourself to reflect on these ideas. So the goal here, you can close your eyes if you're in a space that you can do that. Straighten your spine and turn your awareness inside. So bring some curiosity to the space and just notice. The goal here is not to change anything. The goal is to just notice, just raising your awareness. In this webinar today, what we're going to talk about a lot is internal family systems, because that is woven throughout the Therapeutic approach. So this visualization, this meditation is about welcoming parts. In internal family systems, we call it a constraint releasing model. So what we do is we work part by part. We understand that the psyche is made of many, many different parts. And we introduce the parts to what's called the self, which is the enlightened core of every human. And that part to self relationship, that building of trust, leads to the release of the constraints on our access to self energy. So then young, hurt parts can let go of pain, and protector parts can give up their extreme roles. So this can become a daily visualization, and it's a practice to stay in touch with our internal ecosystem of parts. New term, internal ecosystem. We have an internal ecosystem of many, many different parts. So as you rest and go inside, you're going to get to know a little bit about your part system. In IFS, we understand that we're not a single personality, but we're made up of many different parts, sub-personalities. And actually inviting them to trust you is the second goal of IFS. So going inside, just notice the parts that are here. Some of them may be new, and some may be parts that you've met before, parts that you're familiar with. And here's how you sense them. You can sense parts as sensations in the body, different emotions, so how you're feeling. And they might show up as thoughts or words, voices, words that you see, sensations in your body. So just notice them. Welcome them. See if you're able to get curious about what they might want you to know today, or what they might need from you today. Without having to push them away or ignore them, just see if you can bring some of that self-energy, the self-energy of curiosity, to them. So maybe ask them to separate just a little bit more, allowing you to get more into your body so you can be with them rather than blending with them. We're just asking them to unblend just a little bit, letting them know that they don't have to go away. It's so important. Like Dick's latest book is, There Are No Bad Parts. So we're not forcing any to go away. We're just seeing if they'll allow you to be more in your body, more spacious, and then giving them the ability to feel your presence. Because when parts blend so much, it's really hard for them to even know that you're there. But when they know that you're there, it's soothing, because when they don't know that you're there, it's a lot scarier for them because they think they have to do everything alone. When they unblend, when they give you some space, they can feel the security that comes with knowing that they're not alone and that there is a very competent and loving leader inside. So if they do unblend just a little bit, just notice the quality of your presence. Notice the presence or absence of what we call in IFS the 8 C's and the 5 P's. So the 8 C's of self are calmness, curiosity, compassion, clarity, courage, confidence, creativity, and connectedness. And the 5 P's, which are less known in IFS but just as important, are presence, persistence, perspective, playfulness, and patience. So just notice the presence or absence of the parts that ordinarily run things and how they manifest in your system. There's no way to do this wrong and every way to do it right. The only thing you need to do is to bring a little bit of curiosity about your part system. And if you don't feel fully embodied and you don't feel those 8 C's of self or 5 P's, that just means that there's a part that's blocking. And it may not be willing to unblend today, and that's perfectly fine. That's okay. Just understanding this can be helpful because it can be a trailhead to follow up with later. And notice if you have other parts that are afraid of what would happen if they really let you be in your body with them and really let you be in that self energy in the outside world. Again, just notice. So I'm going to invite you to come back into the room, back into this time space, and see if it's possible to just bring some of that self energy with you as you transition back out with a little bit more awareness of your part system. And so with that, welcome back. Let's see. So that was the parts meditation. And again, I do that before most sessions, before, if I have time, before most therapy sessions, and also before medicine and during the integration that we do after the medicine session. So the understanding, as I spoke about in the meditation, is that in IFS, we understand that we have many different parts. This is so conducive to psychedelic work. It just overlays so beautifully on it. And so much of the Therapeutic approach is really looking at the part system with the psychedelic journey. And I use IFS heavily during the integration phase and understanding mystical experiences, which will weave itself in this seminar. IFS is very open-ended. It can be a very mystical process, and it's an open-ended system that allows whatever our clients' religious or spiritual beliefs are can be plugged into the template of IFS, which makes it lend itself very well to mystical experiences and integration. So many of us focus on the journey itself, but what happens after the psychedelic journey really determines the healing. Epiphanies and mind-blowing experiences are really the easy part, and the real work starts after the journey. So how do we bring these amazing epiphanies that we have in psychedelic experiences back into our day-to-day life? This is really the challenge. I was trained very, very early in psychedelic therapy, and all the trainings that I attended really focused on the safety and keeping the journey itself safe and how to work with people while they're in the journey space. And they would kind of mention integration, but it was just kind of an afterthought, like mention preparation, talk a lot about the journey, how to do music, how to hold space and all of that. And then not enough, it was kind of an afterthought to talk about integration. And I've really found that integration is the most important part of the whole thing. Having mind-blowing experiences is pretty easy, but how do you translate that into, your work, how you deal with your family, how you go on? We don't want to have that psychedelic experience, that truth, that compassion, that love, that self-energy that we feel when we're deep in the journey, to get lost and almost exiled because we go back to a world that doesn't reflect that at all. A really big thing that's very common is that people go too deep too fast without containment on the back end. And we'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. But that's a really big problem with psychedelic journeys, that there's such an incoherence with the depth of the journey and the expansiveness that was felt, and then coming back to the quote real world, and having that not be reflected at all. So there isn't enough containment for landing back into day-to-day life. I say at all my retreats that, because I do all of these group retreats and people get into these really profoundly intimate relationship with the cohort that they're in, because they've been so vulnerable going through these journeys together and so connected with each other. And then they go back into their day-to-day life where they're socially isolated or don't feel that level of intimacy with people. And people say, oh, I guess I have to go back to the real world now. And I always say, that isn't the real world. Humans have evolved to be really deep in tribal relationships and community relationships, and to process things in community. This is the real world. The retreat world is the real world. And the way that we're living, being socially isolated and staring at glowing rectangles all day, our phones or whatever, is not actually how humans have evolved to live. And so our job as facilitators and therapists is to really help people translate that deep connection that they felt to themselves, their internal ecosystem, and to the cohort of people, if you're doing a retreat with people, to help them translate that into their daily life. And it's hard. It's not an easy task to do, because we're really working uphill from a system that is very socially isolating. So it's really important as practitioners to help create a place where clients can track their parts and how they've changed, so that they have a way to measure the shifts that they've had, to measure the benefits that they've received from the retreat or the experience that they've had with you. Another really important aspect is, if you are leading retreats, I talk about retreats in groups a lot because I prefer to work this way. I really understand that group experiences can be extremely beneficial for many reasons. You're really potentiating the healing, where you're using the medicine as a healing agent, the therapist or the facilitator is a healing agent. But then when you have a retreat setting where you have a beautiful retreat center and you have a group of people that is deeply witnessing one another, that also potentiates the healing. I know today's topic isn't about retreats, but I really encourage people to think about working in retreat setting or group setting, because it is so powerful. So if you are working in a group setting or a retreat setting, part of the integration needs to be to help clients who attended keep the energy in their cohort alive and active. And often that has to be online. So creating a structure for clients to be able to come back to the group experience and talk to each other and help one another integrate. So again, the epiphany is really the easy part, but how to weave the insights into daily life is much more challenging. So let's talk about what happens after, like some of the problems that arise. This is what we often see: rubber banding, underwhelm, and punishing parts. So let's go into a little bit more depth about what each of those are. So rubber banding, or some people call it backlash, is when a client comes in and they have an amazing experience. It's just so mind-blowing and really opens them up. And, they have this profound insight. Their depression and anxiety is gone. And then they come back, and as their parts repopulate and come back online, right? When we have our protectors, when we're in a journey, what happens is our protectors kind of go to sleep and are offline. They fade back and they're off duty while the journey's happening. And then they come back online as clients come back after the journey. And we can have a rubber banding effect where the depression, the anxiety comes back online, and it's extremely disappointing for clients because they felt the contrast of not having that be so pervasive. And so it's almost like the rubber banding effect can be where they feel worse after the journey than they felt before the journey, right? They kind of had cobbled together manager parts that had kept them going along in their depression or anxiety, felt the expansion and the awareness of not having all of those parts online. And then afterward, it's like, oh, I don't have all those coping mechanisms that I had before, or I have more insight into those protectors. And I actually feel worse because they were kind of helping me hobble along in my life. And now I don't have access to them like I did before. So that's one thing that we see after journeys that can be problematic. An interesting one, less common but happens, is underwhelm. So clients have a journey, I'd say about 80% of people have very florid visuals and hallucinations in psychedelic journeys. About 20% of people do not have really strong visuals, and that's something that they expected. So they're underwhelmed. They had, just a landscape of gray or black forms, and they're really disappointed. They're very underwhelmed after the journey. I had a really interesting client who had suffered a bout of really bad depression that came after losing her dog. And she went into the ketamine journey, and it was just gray and black sticks and white sand landscapes. And it was very depressing. And her whole journey was very depressing. And she came out and she was just underwhelmed. Like, wow, I thought I was going to have this, beautiful, colorful, hallucinogenic journey and get me out of this gray that I've been feeling this whole time. And really, the work in integration was helping her parts understand that underwhelm, needing witnessing, right? Needing to slow down and deeply witness how barren their experience had been, how sad they had been, how deep that grief was. And so really the work that we did after the journey was so fruitful because because we were able to work with that as the parts that were showing her content that she needed to pay attention to, right? So the work in the integration was so much more important than the work during the journey, right? That she didn't have these florid visuals. We can also see punishing parts. So it's kind of related to rubber banding, but a little bit different. Sometimes when people are really deep in a journey and their protectors are offline, they reveal secrets that have not been spoken. It is not uncommon at all. I have it happen all the time where people remember traumas that they've buried and exiled into their unconscious mind, and that percolates up during the psychedelic session. And so what can happen is as those protectors come back online on the back end of the journey, as people return to normal mind, those parts can be very punishing during integration. They can say things to the client like, how dare you reveal secrets that should never be revealed? You shouldn't have gotten your hopes up. This is, you're a bad person for doing drugs. You can have all kinds of punishing parts that come on afterward. And it's really important to be aware of this potential as clinicians. What I've really seen is when we do our work on the front end, when we do work with preparation, you can see less of these issues on the back end. So what does that mean? It means on the front end, when we're doing preparation with our clients, we're really watching for things like, that this is their last hope, that they have parts that are over enthusiastic, right? We don't want to feed into that kind of narrative. We want to work with those parts and let them know that there are no guarantees, that working with psychedelics is an ongoing relational situation. It's not a one and done. I've never really seen someone do one session and then all of their trauma and all of their issues are gone. It doesn't work that way. So really managing expectations and then working with protectors. So before the journey, I go in and I really slow down and make sure all the protectors are on board with how deep the medicine journey is. So really the answer to this question about post-journey crash is not only providing really good integration for folks on the back end after the journey, but working with protector systems and doing your prep beforehand, not going too deep too soon with the medicine, not too much medicine, working with a protector system, and then having adequate integration. And then I want to talk a little bit about islands of coherence, validating that shift through shared experience and shared meaning. So, what are islands of coherence? This is a term that I've created that's been inspired by Nate Hagens, who talks about the meta crisis in a different realm. But the way I see islands of coherence is creating circles to provide safe and resonant spaces for participants to connect, to share their language. So there's a shared language about their experience, and build communities rooted in compassion and shared vision. So even if you're not doing a retreat or a group, helping your clients by giving them some resources to join groups, join integration groups, can be extremely beneficial for people, because if they don't have a family or a circle, a social circle that validates their experience, there can be a lot of incoherence when they come back to their day-to-day life, and it can really dismiss the changes that they can make. And so I really strongly recommend creating islands of coherence for your journeyers, right? Having shared meaning, places that psychedelic journeyers can return to remind them of their profound journey and shared meaning and shared language. So this is something that's really important to help people weave the expansiveness of their mystical experience, their expansiveness of their awareness of self into their day-to-day life, to have reminders, to have this island of coherence that they can come back to, and to be reinforced and validated with the changes that they've made. I've found this to be one of the most important components of psychedelic work. In the Therapeutic approach and the integration framework, I've been developing this within, between, and beyond way of thinking about integration. People like Ken Wilber in Integral Theory and other developmental psychologists talk about how people need to work on their own autobiographical material, their own issues, personal issues first, before thinking about how they relate to people relationally and then in the world. And I totally disagree with this. In IFS, we understand, and in archetypal psychology, we understand as above, so below. The micro is the macro and vice versa. So my understanding is that we can work with these things concurrently if we give a system during integration for our clients to understand this framework. So within, anchoring insights into the internal ecosystem of parts, creating secure attachment to the internal world, breath, movement, sensation tracking, all of this is helping clients go inside. That meditation that we just did is an internal ecosystem parts exercise. So you're helping clients understand that. What's happening inside of me? How do I create internal secure attachment? We're also talking to our clients concurrently with noticing their reaction to the parts in those people closest to us. So, my wife drives me crazy. I came back from the retreat and she's like, why haven't you changed? So his wife has parts that are activated around wanting him to change. And then he has parts that meet his wife's parts that are defensive protectors, right? So helping clients understand that it's not just how we relate to our internal system of managers and protectors and exiles, but also how do we relate to the world that's close around us, our circle around us, right? So helping reframe, doing meaning-making shifts, looking at that relational community around us, repairing attachment wounds to those closest to us. So weaving this as therapists into our language, working with our clients. And then beyond, what's happening in the larger system and society. Earlier, I just said, people go back to this traumatizing culture of being socially isolated on social media that's, has really crazy algorithms that are keeping us feeling isolated and polarized. We see, for example, in the United States, there's an incredible polarization happening. It's even woven into our relationship. We can look at this as part system, that there are protectors that are polarized against each other. And we can help our clients recognize that and how they are reacting to this larger system, the beyond system. So this is a really important component of helping people make meaning after their psychedelic journeys, because psychedelic journeys are nested in the internal ecosystem parts relationally and then beyond in the larger ecosystem. And I've been leaning on this more and more in my practice because I just see the incredible value of speaking this way to clients. Okay, so let's talk about clinical pitfalls. And this is kind of these, those backlash, the rubber banding that we talked about earlier. So dissociation and trauma activation, as I mentioned before, you can have people access, because their protector system is offline during the journey, they can access memories, trauma memories that weren't available to them before. They can access exiles. And so it's so important to be trauma educated and trauma informed as a clinician. You must know how to work with trauma if you're working with psychedelics. That is an absolute must. That's not optional. You have to be able to work with trauma, because if we evoke trauma with a deep psychedelic journey and we have no idea how to work with that, it can actually be more traumatizing to the client. I've had many clients come to my practice who have had traumatic experiences in like ayahuasca ceremonies, and the person who was facilitating had no clue how to work with trauma. And so it just got exiled and pushed away, and the client was more traumatized than before. Please, please, please know how to work with trauma if you're working with psychedelics. This is internal family systems, EMDR, somatic therapy practices. Trauma is not a cognitive issue. It's not telling the story. It has nothing to do with that. Trauma is a nervous system issue. So knowing how to work with nervous systems issues is imperative. Rubber banding and backlash, as I mentioned earlier, going too deep too soon, not slowing down to get consent from the protector system before going deep in a journey. I often, with clients, will work with the protector system before ketamine journey. And the beauty with ketamine, that's unlike other psychedelic medicines, is you can really titrate the dose for the level of comfort for the protectors. Other medicines, it's not like that. It's kind of like a light switch where you either are in it or you're not in it, right? Ketamine's a wonderful medicine to work with when you're working with people that have a lot of protectors that are really afraid of going deep. You're getting consent. So I always do, on the front end in the preparation, I always do meditations, inviting the protectors to give voice to their concerns and engaging with them. And that's really how you avoid that rubber banding and backlash on the back end of the journey. Unraveling worldviews before new ones are constructed. This is really important to think about. Sometimes people can have very rigid worldviews when they come to you, and maybe a very dogmatic religious view that's very rigid. And if they have a deep psychedelic journey, they can have things that challenge their religious views, and that can be really disconcerting. So I talk a lot with clients, if that has happened in the integration, spending time helping them make meaning of their journey and helping them bridge, if they're of a specific religious faith, helping them bridge what they saw in their journey as archetypal symbolic content that their parts are showing them, and helping them understand that and weave that into the meaning that they want to have, the worldview that they have constructed, and helping them bridge that back in. And sometimes that can be really challenging. It's not unheard of for people to have psychedelic journeys and just completely leave the religion that they belong to. I had a woman that was from a very rigid Christian religion, and she went into her first ketamine journey, and she said, "I saw God as a woman." And she came back, and she had a lot of backlash from her protectors about saying that to me. And, we had to work with some of that content to make sense of it and help her ground herself and work with those protectors that were really coming up around having said that. So it's really important to have time and space to help people make meaning of their mystical experiences and help them plug that into what they want to continue with in their daily world. It's not for us to dictate what people believe or what their religious views should be. We're just helping them create that coherence within their internal system and their parts to help them land back into their lives without too much disruption. And another pitfall is social isolation after. So, I talked about the islands of coherence. What can happen for people is they have this mind-blowing experience in psychedelics, and then there's nowhere to talk about that. There's nowhere to go from there other than talking to their psychedelic facilitator or therapist. And that can be really dysregulating for people, and it can make them further isolated from everyone around them. If they go back into their family system and just talk about, how, love is everything and that's all there is, and their family hasn't had that experience, that can seem like they've gone crazy, and that can be really incoherent for them. And so really helping them make sense of that and helping them understand that the people around them have not had that same experience. And so learning how to titrate their communications, being honest with the people around them, but learning how to hold what has happened in the sacredness of what has happened and help them translate that into that between world, that within, between, and beyond, helping them work in that between realm of translating their experience to the people around them. That's a really important part of being a good facilitator and a good integration therapist. Okay, so what are some practical tools that the therapist can give to their clients? I love journaling. I think journaling can be one of the most powerful ways people can bring their insights back, giving them exercise prompts. So these are things that I give my clients. Asking in a journal entry, or even if some people say I don't like to journal, you can encourage them to do voice notes to themselves, which is really helpful because then they can go back and listen to the tone of their voice and what they record. So how have I changed? What do I notice is different from before the journey? What parts need my attention? What would the distressing, problematic situation, how would it change if I were in self-energy, if I was in love? If I was in love instead of fear, how would this be different? And I talk a lot with my clients about agenda versus purpose. So agenda is like burden parts. It has an outcome that needs to happen. Purpose is more love-based. It's more open-ended. It's more self-energy, right? So how would this situation be different if I was in purpose rather than agenda? If I was self-led in my manager system versus an agenda that's very rigid and needs the specific outcome. So helping people kind of let go of their grip a little bit with their parts work can be really powerful. And again, those 8 C's, so powerful to help your clients remember. So that can be kind of a compass, a true north for them. Is this self-energy, these 8 C's, and what do I need to do to be more in self-energy? How would this situation change if I was more in love instead of fear? Okay, and then I also encourage people to do that meditation that I offered you. You can record a meditation for your clients to do each day, or you can help them with prompts about what to meditate on. What does that part I discovered need from me today? Helping them understand that parts move, morph, and change. It's really interesting. You can do some parts work or something can happen during the journey where the part is a little bit agitated still. And then a week goes by, and when the client checks back in with that part, it can have totally changed and unburdened itself. So understanding that parts aren't static, that once you unburden them, they can keep growing and keep changing. They become more fluid in their roles. which is really interesting. Um, and then I talk to clients when they come out of psychedelic journeys and going back into their daily world. If you know you're going to enter a conflictual situation, let the parts know that it's not them. It's not the 8-year-old that was terrified of her dad going into the business meeting with her boss. That you know now how to be in self energy. We do some work around getting into self energy, and it's you, your self led manager, going in to the meeting with your boss, not the 8-year-old that was terrified of her dad. So you're letting the parts know that they can kind of take a back seat so that more competent leader, self-led leader can go into these situations. And that becomes really important conversation for people in integration phase, like how to take that self energy that they discovered in the psychedelic journey into their day-to-day world. So again, just kind of revisiting that parts meditation, inviting your clients to go inside, noticing feelings and some sensations, bringing compassion, asking for unblending, noticing the sensations again, and asking what they need them to know. This is super helpful to do with your clients, to have them do for themselves as part of their integration. Dream analysis. I love this component of integration work. People often have very vivid dreams after psychedelic journeys and see symbols in their day-to-day life. So instead of kind of pushing that away or dismissing it, really welcome that. Understand that parts are showing symbols in dreams or in journey material. And if you can help make meaning, you can help your clients metabolize what they experienced, right? It helps them make meaning. And this is a really important thing for the psyche. So oftentimes in journeys, this comes up all the time. In fact, the retreat that I just did recently, someone saw a wall. They were like locked behind a door and in their journey, and we were doing integration. And I pointed out that wall, that door that you saw, is actually a part. And that was pretty amazing for the client to see, oh, this is a protector that's worried about me getting to exiles, to get deeper. And so you can start working with this content with clients to help them make meaning with what they saw in their journeys. So walls can be protectors, and there can be, or doors can be protectors. Demons or dragons can be firefighter parts, these extreme parts that want to take us away from pain. And familiar people that show up in dreams or in journey content can actually represent internalized parts. So I talk with my clients about how the mother that showed up in your journey isn't your literal mother. It's an introjected mother that's in your system, your ecosystem of parts. And in this world, we can talk to her, we can work with her, we can unburden her, right? So it's an introjected symbol of mother. So the mother that someone had when they were 5 years old is different than their, 90-year-old mother now that they're 65, right? So helping people understand that even familiar people that show up in dreams and journey content are actually internalized parts. Mystical experiences. Let's talk about this briefly. I know we don't have too much time left, but research shows that, and this is from the Mystical Experience Questionnaire, that having mystical experiences actually correlates to improvements in depression, anxiety, and overall well-being. Mystical experiences bring a profound sense of unity. So having meaning and catalyzing deep psychological healing and transformation within the part system. So it's that within, between, and beyond that I talked about earlier. When people have mystical experiences, they commonly have a feeling of being unified with everyone and everything, kind of this panpsychic experience. And that can also help with that within system, that unity within the system that's bathed in self-energy. And that's really the goal of IFS, is helping create secure attachment internally. And also, pretty reliably, deep psychedelic experiences bring us access to self-energy. It puts the protectors asleep, sometimes the exiles asleep, and we're able to get into that deep sense of compassion and presence with that self-energy. So mystical experiences are super powerful, and it's very important that we help work with clients helping them interpret the symbolism. We don't interpret the symbols for them. We ask their parts why they're showing that symbol. And it's really amazing. A tree for one person can be about growth and being rooted and being, you know, connected to the divine. But a tree for someone else, a tree for a lumberjack client is going to have a totally different meaning for them, right? It could be resources or whatever. So allowing your client to make the meaning instead of projecting your own symbolic meaning. Helping them ground. So using that mystical experience to help them have magic and transcendent experiences in their daily life, to watch for symbols in their daily life and help them be grounded without having to bypass the emotional reality. So encouraging and facilitating a dialogue between parts and reinforcing them with that feeling of awe and unity from their psychedelic experience, helping them understand that that's the true north, that that's reality, can be very, very beneficial for clients. And before we wrap up, I'm just so excited about this research study that just came out a few weeks ago by Robin Carhart Harris, who's a really phenomenal researcher in the psychedelic space. This was so exciting for me because this totally reinforces the importance of mystical experience. So this research study was the neuropsychology of Jungian archetypes and psychedelic experience. Barely came out. So exciting because we don't really have a lot of experience on, or a lot of research on, archetypal psychology. But what he found so interesting to me is that they're calling it eigen modes, which are intrinsic harmonic modes of the brain. These are like waves of brain activation that happen with psychedelic experiences, and that bridges depth psychology to neuroscience. So this research is trying to help us understand why we have vivid symbolic mythic content, vivid archetypes, and meeting beings, things like that with a neuroscience perspective. So what he's saying, and the next slide kind of goes into it more deeply, is that we have these top-down experiences in normal waking consciousness where the frontal lobes are interpreting things, and that's the primary default mode network that we have going on. In psychedelic experiences, it's not a top-down experience, it's a bottom-up experience. So what's happening is we have this affective core, the subcortex of our brain, which is like the reptilian emotional part of our brain. That's evoked in psychedelic experience as primary. And then we have the next layer of brain, which is imagery and sensory. So this is the low-level cortex. We have archetypal content because all of us experience mother, father, dawn, sunset, night, dark, night, day, cold, warm. And so our brain in its most basic form is wired for archetypal understanding. And as that percolates up from the brain, we then start to have this emotional experience with it. And then finally, it percolates up to the cortex. And that's where the story comes. This is where the meaning making comes. And so using this form, we can say, wow, our clients are having these deep mystical experiences. And my job as a clinician is to help them understand what happened to them by creating meaning and story to put with these deep archetypal experiences. So I just thought this was extremely exciting. They say that we need more research needed to verify this, but it was really wonderful to see that they're thinking about how neuroscience can reinforce these deep mystical archetypal experiences that pretty universally our clients have. Yeah, very exciting work. Finally, I'll offer that it's important for you to remember your self-care. I never want to end a training without encouraging facilitators and therapists to take care of themselves, thinking about what your self-care protocol is. If you're doing consultations, connecting with other providers, releasing intense energy, this will help you be more present for your clients to help them integrate powerful experiences. Thank you so much. And I'll turn it over to you, Fleet.
Wow, thank you so much, Sunny. I've been I've been doing psychedelic work and been involved in psychedelic work and its integration with therapeutic healing and spiritual evolution for more than 50 years. And that was just so profoundly resonant with my entire experience. And I think people can really, yeah, I'm sure you all really get the sense of the profound depth there in Sunny's work and her wisdom and understanding. And so we're going to move into Q&A in just a moment, and Sunny's going to answer as many of your questions as possible. So please be putting your questions into the chat. We really want to have a great dialogue with all of you. And whether you're currently a licensed clinician practicing psychedelic assisted psychotherapy in some manner, or whether you're a guide supporting psychedelic journeys with people, or whether you're aspiring to either as a licensed clinician or as a guide. I think you know that this work and to really hold space for others with integrity and depth and really the kind of integrity and depth and wisdom that Sunny was just sharing with all of us requires training. It requires that we all do our own work, right? And so we're really proud to be partnering with Therapy Wisdom and their team and HeartMind to bring Sunny's course to you all, which is an in-depth professional training, just about as solid as you could possibly go into her Panther method, her Therapeutic approach, and her Panther method, where we go through 6 modules, cover in-depth preparation work, the management and effective facilitation of sessions, whether it's one-on-one therapy or whether it's in group settings or retreat settings. And then really importantly, as Sunny was really emphasizing in this webinar, de-integration work, which is really perhaps the most important part of it. And how we can show up as guides and clinicians and therapists to facilitate this in a way where we're able to bring our best wisdom and hold space in a way that really supports clients and supports journeyers, but also we take care of ourselves because this is deep work. Whatever side of the part of it we're on, it is deep work. And I'm sure many of you have had the experience of holding space for others. And even though when we're holding space and we're not currently under the influence of medicine, we're on a journey. We're being profoundly impacted by being in that space with others as they journey, whether it's one-on-one or in groups. So this is just such important work, and I really just want to say a little bit about this course, and then we're going to open up to the Q&A in just a minute. So I think there couldn't be a stronger recommendation for Sunny's work and the depth of it than her partnership with Dick Schwartz. And as part of the course, you'll get a free bonus video with Sunny and Dick talking about the work and their work together. But the depth here is just incredible. And you can go through, we put for the Therapeutic course, the link to that is now in the chat. So you can click on that and read through it and explore through it. And you'll have that. We'll be following up with you all with more information about this. So you can really look at it thoroughly and see this opportunity. But in the course, again, we'll go through her Panther method, which the P of Panther is all about preparation. And then the middle part is all about the A and T is all about how do we really show up to facilitate sessions in the most profound way. And really with this emphasis on both the IFS parts work and the understanding of archetypal psychology that Sunny was just sharing with us. So there's attunement and then the needs of the protector parts and how to hold space for all that, understanding the trauma map and so forth, going through these issues of that come up around the firefighter parts and the rubber banding and all that Sunny was just talking about us with. So she'll go into that in great depth, and then really going into the integration and helping people bring these experiences, whatever they experience in the psychedelic sessions, into their lives in really empowering and healing and life affirming and spiritually activating ways. Right. So I wanted to talk about a few of along with this in-depth 6 module course, which will include another live session with Sunny. I believe that's, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, team November 12th, I believe. But this in-depth course where you'll really get the full training on how to hold space, whether in one-on-one therapeutic sessions or in group settings, retreat settings, for people's psychedelic journeys and how to really support them in the deepest, most effective way. And then you're going to get bonuses. Again, I mentioned the conversation with Sonny and Dick Schwartz, also a conversation with Sonny and David Starfire, the really important aspect of bringing music into these psychedelic journeys. And David Starfire is just an incredible artist who creates the incredible music that Sonny and Dick use in their retreats, and which I've experienced personally. In fact, the first retreat I was in, David was there in person and orchestrating the music live there. Also, an interview with Courtney Watson, really honoring the sacred reciprocity and indigenous roots of psychedelic therapy. There's also another bonus video where Sunny is just giving an overview of internal family systems so we can have a better understanding of that. And then very important on dosing. There's a whole nother component where Sunny goes into the really important aspect of dosing and how we can work with psycholytic doses, which really just help people get into a really ideal kind of therapeutic frame without really being in a powerful psychedelic session. But then going from there all the way to low to medium to stronger doses, whether it's with ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, which of course is the one legal form of psychedelic assisted therapy in the U.S. outside of Colorado and Oregon, um, and uh, and then also invocations and meditations and guided practices. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. You'll get a playlist for therapy sessions, and you'll get an audio version of a chapter from Sonny's work. So this is just an incredible offering, and we're able to offer it now for those of you who are attended and registering for this webinar. So if you're watching the recording of this, this is available to you too. You can tell this is an in-depth professional training course. Very often, something like this would be thousands of dollars, and we're going to offer it to you today for only $497. So I don't want to take any more time away from the Q&A than that. We'll circle back at the end and affirm anything. If you have technical questions, feel free to reach out to our team now, to directly to the team in chat. But other than that, let's put your questions into the chat and get into dialogue with Sunny here. We have an incredible opportunity to be in dialogue with somebody who holds so much experience and wisdom around this. So actually, I think first thing we're going to do is we're going to briefly bring on Bridget, if you can do that. If we could briefly bring on Carla, who just wants to share a little bit of her experience of being in this work, experiencing Sunny's work directly. So can we bring Carla on, Bridget?
Hi, Fleet. Hi, Sunny. I just wanted to say that I'm here because I found the work that I've done with Sunny and Dick so beneficial, and it was really helpful for me. I'd done actually quite a lot of my own healing work before coming to IFS and ketamine assisted psychotherapy, and many of my wounds that I was trying to address were really early in utero and birth related wounds. And those weren't accessible to me through other methods. And it's just been really wonderful to have access to the really young exiles that arose through working with psychedelics. So I just wanted to say that, and then to say that I'm here if it would be helpful to have my point of view on anything that you're answering through the Q&A.
I recognize your sweet voice, Carla. Thank you so much. It's so good to hear from you. Thank you for that.
Sonny, we had a question from David Mitchell. Oh, I'm sorry, one before when I lost one. Well, anyway, I'll just ask. I can't remember who it is now. But they were asking you, oh, there it is, from David. If you could just really briefly sort of define what you were referencing as depth psychology and moral injury, those two ideas.
Certainly. Yeah. And I apologize for the complex terms. We had such a short amount of time to go into everything. There's so much more in the course where, I really dive into depth psychology, archetypal psychology, and IFS. So apologies for the terms. So depth psychology is the work of C.G. Jung. It's also known as Jungian psychology, archetypal psychology. I think it was James Hillman coined the term depth psychology. And there's this understanding in depth psychology that symbols and archetypes are inherent to who we are as being human beings, and that there's this imaginal realm that's behind the physical material world. And the imaginal realm is like an energetic realm of archetypes that the material realm is placed upon. It's kind of hard to briefly define depth psychology, but I would point you to, do a chat GPT search on Carl Jung or C.G. Jung and have it give you like an outline of his work so that you can kind of orient toward what it means. But Jung was a early student of Freud and developed his whole method of archetypal and depth psychology based on that. And then the other thing was moral injury.
Yes, moral injury. Hmm.
So, moral injury is a kind of trauma. A lot of traumas that we experience is that there's a perpetrator that commits trauma against us, and we're a victim of trauma, right? Moral injury is when we are doing traumatizing things to other people. So, it's really notoriously difficult to treat. And for example, many veterans have moral injury of the things that happened in war are not allowed in day-to-day normal life. And so they come back from doing things that they were forced to do in the military into normal life or day-to-day life. And those things feel very incoherent with what is acceptable moral code in normal life. And so then they have a difficult time squaring that, and that becomes a trauma in their psyche. So we can work with moral injury using psychedelics and internal family systems. In fact, some of the early training videos on MDMA from MAPS are work with Annie and Michael Mithofer, who are phenomenal psychedelic therapists, and they use internal family systems. That the training videos, and I think you might be able to find these online, are with a soldier, a veteran that has moral injury, and they're using IFS to help him process while he's deep in the MDMA journey, process the moral injury. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you very much, Sunny. I think I'm going to combine two questions here from Elizabeth and David. So one is whether integration practices differ based on the psychedelic substance, whether it's ketamine or psilocybin or something else. And then the other was whether you also work with non-psychedelic mystical experiences and whether it would be a different pathway to integrating those experiences.
Great questions. Okay, so regardless of the medicine, the integration is the same. Ketamine is known for being very soothing to the nervous system. It binds to the NMDA receptor sites instead of the 5-HT2A receptor. So it has a very different signature in the way that it works in the system, where it quiets the right amygdala really reliably. And so it has a more calming effect than the other psychedelics. So you're adjusting your integration for that. But it's the same. I do want to add in, there's some great research by Gul Dolan about these critical learning windows that are opened from psychedelic experiences. So when we're toddlers, we have these critical learning windows open, and we have all these neurons that are growing and dendrites growing and fluidity in our brain. So I just saw a chat says research by who? Gul Dolan, Guldolan, fascinating researcher. But these critical learning windows are open after the psychedelic experience. So in integration, it varies in length of time. So ketamine, it's a few hours after. Psilocybin, it can be weeks. Ayahuasca, it can be even longer. And ibogaine, they haven't even found the window close. So you can see how important it is to do really good integration with different psychedelic medicines when the brain is open and these critical learning windows are fluid again, like they were when we were toddlers. It also underscores how important it is to be an ethical, knowledgeable, well-trained clinician so that you know how to work with things that come up like trauma in the integration right after the journey. And then what was the other part of that, Fleet? I'm sorry.
Whether also you have experience working with non-psychedelic mystical experiences, whether there's a different approach there.
Absolutely. I mean, people can have spontaneous. I've had people that have had near-death experiences come to see me, and it's the same process. People that have done breath work with no medicine at all can induce powerful. I had one of my most psychedelic experiences doing holotropic breath work with no medicine whatsoever. And, I'm very experienced in the psychedelic world. So, yeah, it's absolutely the same. I've had people come to me that claimed that they were abducted by aliens and had trauma with that. And I thought, I'll just do parts work the same as I would with anyone else because it's not my job to say what they experienced was real or not. It's my job to help them integrate that experience. So yes, when people have mystical experiences, it's our job as clinicians and facilitators to help support the meaning making and the integration metabolization of that material.
So, Sunny, I think this is a really important question here. The person's asking, and it was I don't have a name there. I would have said their name, but for clients that don't have a lot of access to internal or external protectors because of childhood abandonment, neglect, or attachment wound issues, are these psychedelic assisted therapy approaches appropriate to them, are workable for them?
Super important question, very essential. I talk about this a lot in the course about how to manage this, how to assess who's appropriate for psychedelics and who to screen out. In IFS, we don't really pathologize anyone. So we're not looking at pathologies and saying yes or no, but it is important to understand the research on psychedelics. We screen out generally, and I err on the side of caution because we're still trying to get these medicines legalized. There isn't a lot of research on different psychological issues. And so we want to really go with where the research is, which is that we screen out schizophrenia. Disorganized thinking patterns don't do great with psychedelics. More ruminative, rigid thinking patterns do great with psychedelics. So disorganized minds are like mania, like bipolar with mania that's unmanaged, schizophrenia, extreme personality disorders, that kind of axis 2 stuff, that what we used to call axis 2, narcissism, antisocial personality disorder. These things don't tend to do great with psychedelics. The ones that do great with psychedelics are depression, anxiety, OCD, trauma, right? Because these are ruminative thinking patterns. So we're kind of screening out that. If someone is like on the cusp of that, I spend a lot more time on the front end getting them grounded and making sure they have access to self energy before we're going into the psychedelic experience. We really over focus on psychedelic medicines as the healing component. And you have to understand that when people are doing journeys, it starts with when they consider coming to see you. It starts when you do preparation, there's no medicine involved. And so don't be seduced into thinking that the medicine is the most important component, because it is not. It amplifies things. It opens up the aperture of what you're processing. But doing that work on the front end is super essential. Taking your time, slowing down, working with the protector system. If people have super ornate, robust, rigid protectors, it's for a reason. They've evolved to be that way for a reason. And we're trusting the system that it's not ready to go into the exiles. And so slow down, work with those protectors before giving them so much medicine that their protectors are offline and they can't defend themselves against the exiles that come out, right?
Mm. It's kind of a related question. What about people who are diagnosed as being on the so-called spectrum, Asperger's syndrome and so forth, do and maybe have less access to their parts or awareness? Or I guess the question here was actually, do they have parts? I'm sure the answer to that would be yes, but I'm curious if you want to explore that, your experience of working with people.
Yeah, absolutely. I have worked with several people that were, on the spectrum, high enough functioning that they could, engage in talk therapy, but it's great for that. Working with parts that are rigid or ruminative, working with parts that are, mask. I have a client right now that we're doing a lot of work with his masking parts and how exhausting that is. And they're like these wonderful ornate protectors that help him get through dealing with people all day, right? And psychedelics can be really helpful for that. I've worked with people that are on the spectrum with psychedelics, absolutely. Of course, you're wanting to make sure that you're doing enough work to establish trust, easing into it, working with protector systems, right? There's a different system of protection that is for people that are on the spectrum. And now we're looking at, people with ADHD and things like that with as part of being on the spectrum, and it can be powerful for people with ADD, ADHD. I'm a person diagnosed with ADHD, and psychedelics have helped me immensely. I'll also add that I'm trying to remember the woman's name because it's several years ago that she did the research. Alicia Danforth, I think is her name. Research on people on the spectrum who have social anxiety with MDMA, and the outcomes were great. So MDMA can be really heart-opening and connect us to our compassionate parts, and that can be really helpful. Social anxiety with people that are on the spectrum with ketamine has been amazing. I work with a lot of clients with that issue, and it's been really helpful.
So, this is a good question. I think you may have addressed it a little bit already, but in the preparation phase, doing parts work as part of the preparation. I know you and I have discussed this. Generally, in any kind of therapeutic work, there needs to be informed consent, right? But if you think in terms of parts, which part is giving informed consent? So, we can get a much broader or deeper, possibly informed consent in this way. But I wonder if you could talk about that part of the preparation, not only the informed consent aspect, but helping work with the parts to really to prepare a person for the best possible psychedelic work in relationship to their parts.
It's great. And this was outside of the topic of the webinar, but we do a deep dive into working with protectors in the Panther method, right? So we're really like in that T of Panther, the trauma mapping, really working with the protector system, slowing everything down is discussed in much more depth. But, you're right on that, I mentioned briefly in this today, you can have clients that come in that are very excited about psychedelics. This is my last chance, and this is going to save me. And often behind that is a protector that's very nervous about being dismantled and taken out of the system. So just like you said, Fleet, you can have parts that are very enthusiastic, but then you have other parts that are behind them that are very nervous about what's happening. And so it's really essential to slow down and engage all of the parts. And how I do that, and I talk about it in the course and walk you through how to do it. But you're doing a protector meditation and really engaging and opening the space for the protectors to give voice to their concerns and taking time to address those concerns before going into the medicine.
Yeah. What about situations where post journey, um, uh, people kind of don't fully come out of the perceptual changes they experienced during the journey, or maybe even they're still having some kind of mystical experiences, or in some cases, a sense of contact with other entities or beings or so forth. But where it's sort of like, I mean, it most commonly the medicine does its work, and we know if it's ketamine, it's 45 minutes or so. If it's a psilocybin journey, it may be 4, 5, 6, 7 hours and so forth. And once the medicine wears off, normally the person is back in a normal perceptual reality, but sometimes that's not the case. So I'm curious if you how you work with that.
Yeah, and that's definitely there's not a blanket statement here about how to work with that because it can be many different things. As I was mentioning earlier, the disorganized mind can become more disorganized after a psychedelic journey. And so you really want to screen for people that are at risk for that beforehand if you can. Sometimes it can engage that disorganized thinking, and result in a manic episode or something like that after, and you need to work with that clinically to help manage that. That's one thing, but often we can have spiritual emergencies that don't have anything to do with psychosis or issues like that, that we can open the door to guides while we're in our psychedelic journey. In IFS, we talk about guides, these beings that are not parts that are here to guide us. And, we can open that door and then have in dream space at night, reconnection with that spiritual guide. And so it's really important to be adept as a clinician to be able to tease out what's happening with the client, using your clinical tools and clinical assessment to see if it's psychosis or a manic episode, or if it's a spiritual emergency that's opening up something greater that's really wanting to come through the client. And regardless of what it is, you're not pushing it away or trying to numb it. You're trying to really engage the parts that are having this experience and working with those parts and welcoming them to talk about what they're experiencing, how to metabolize that into waking life. How are you going to take that and then engage in waking life? Because you still have to put on your shoes every day and go to work. So how are we going to work with this material to help you do that? And in all journeys, we say don't make any major changes for at least 30 days after the journey. I mean, if someone comes out and they say, I hate my job, I don't ever want to go back, and I'm going to quit tomorrow, and I'm, going to leave with the girl up the street, and we're going to move to Ecuador. It's like, okay, slow down, slow your roll. Let's take some time to really integrate what you experience, because if something was true in your journey, it will remain true in 30 days for sure. So let's just slow down and make sure we're metabolizing everything before doing any major decisions.
Yeah, and people may be able to find Christina Groff, Stan Groff's late wife, Christina's work around spiritual emergence. I remember I was really impacted when I first read her work quite a while back, and she started the Spiritual Emergence Network because often these experiences are getting misdiagnosed as psychotic experiences. But on the other hand, it could be a disorganized emergence of a psychotic experience. So we have to really develop the discernment around that. And
And if I may add something, because this is part of integration too, spiritual emergence is one thing. You can also have trauma memories that come up in the journey. And it's that same thing where if something is true, it'll remain true. And instead of leading people into, oh, that must be literally true, and I'm going to reinforce that, staying in self energy as a clinician and working with the client to give meaning to understand that. And if that memory that percolated up is a literal memory, that will keep emerging and asserting itself in the way that it is, in the clarity that it is, as you work with the trauma memory. And you have to be pretty adept as a trauma therapist to work with that content and notice its durability in working with a client, because their nervous system will be activated in a certain way that tells you that it's a trauma memory and not just a symbolic content that came up in their journey, right?
Mhm.
It's that same practice.
I wonder if you could just give an example, and I know you go into this in great depth in the course as you mentioned, but some of the typical protector parts that you work with in preparation, or that could come up as of some form of backlash post session.
Sure. Everyone has a unique system of protectors, but protectors can follow categories of archetypes, right? Because we have common experiences. So, many people have a perfectionist protector. Many people have a critic, an inner critic protector. Many of us have managers that want to keep everything normal. We might have extreme protectors that dissociate us. They're called firefighters, that dissociate us from pain, that just kind of make us feel numb and out of it, or drive us to drink alcohol or work too much or exercise too much. And so these patterns are pretty typical for people. And when you see backlash, often what you see are these managers and firefighters are used to doing their jobs, and now they don't know what to do if some deep secret has been revealed. We tend to see, we always see, the more extreme the protector, the more extreme the exile. The more hurt the exile is the more extreme and rigid the protector is. So when you have clients that come in and they have really rigid protector system, that's letting you know that they have some pretty fragile exiles, and to proceed with caution, right? So we're assessing on that front end, how fluid is that self energy in their protector system? And if there's not a lot of self energy and there's a lot of extreme rigidity, slow everything down, because you don't want to dismantle that protection system before they go deep in a journey.
So, Sunny, we have Dr. Wesley Brown with us, who is a neuroscientist and neuropsychologist, and he asked a question about non-psychedelic mystical experiences as well, but I think you already addressed that. But he was also, I think, I suspect, I imagine he comes from a very kind of empirical background, and some of the language here, from his view, maybe seems a little nebulous. And but I wonder if you could point to some of, you already talked about Gould Dolan's really important research. There's Carhart Harris, who you mentioned, who's done a lot of research around the neurophysiology of what he calls the Goldilocks zone. So there's a lot of empirical neurophysiological research going on here. I've also talked with Bessel van der Kolk, the renowned trauma therapist, and he says, well, he's deeply steeped in his research, but nonetheless, he said, well, we used to criticize stuff as psychobabble. Now we're all into neurobabble. But nonetheless, I think it's important because he said, in many cases, we don't really completely understand the mechanics of healing that are operational in psychedelics. Yet we have some windows into it and some ideas, and there's a lot of research going on. But I just wonder if you could address maybe that, if it is a tension, I don't know, but between the art of therapy and the experiential clinical work and what we're understanding on a research neurophysiological level.
I mean, there's a ton of research. That's not my area of expertise. I've done one research study on psychedelics, ketamine, and meditation with VR, which was really an exciting research project. But other than that, I haven't done a lot of research. But I appreciate the work that people are doing, and there's a lot of it. Um, I'm a clinician, and I see the value and I see the change that happens with good therapy combined with ketamine. For example, I have many clients that come in that have done the strip mall ketamine version where no one spoke to them. They went in, had high doses of IV ketamine for depression or anxiety. No one spoke to them. They just wheeled them out to the Uber and sent them home. And they didn't experience the shifts and changes that they're having when you're leveraging the psychedelic medicine with really good clinical integration with them. And I'm seeing, I just, in this veterans retreat that I just hosted, I had two or three people that had series of ketamine treatments without therapy, and they didn't have any benefit, and came to the retreat that I just did and said, this was the most profound, life-changing experience I've ever had. So anecdotally, I know that I'm not a researcher, but anecdotally, I see the power of combining it. And, and I see it every day with my clients. So that's my stance, being a therapist and not a neurophysiologist.
Yeah, I also think, sometimes we write off clinical work as anecdotal. That's hardly the case. We can talk, there's qualitative research based on huge amounts of clinical experience and clinical data that I think is in many ways just another very valid pathway to research and understanding. We have Lauren here, who's currently involved in psychedelic assisted psychotherapy training at CIIS. And she's herself has experienced some ayahuasca ceremonies, but she's a psychiatrist herself. And but she says there are many participants in her current cohort of this training who have not had psychedelic experiences. And she's curious about your thoughts on this, about the necessity of practitioners who are being trained to hold space for this work to actually have experienced the work directly themselves.
Well, you asked me the right question because I'm really passionate about this, and this will be a great one to end on. You must have your own experience with psychedelics before you ever serve them to anyone. It's like, this is the analogy. Would you go to a travel agent that had never left their small town in Kansas to go on a worldwide trip all through Asia? You would never do that. You would go to the person who's been there, that knows all the local restaurants, that knows how to get the most out of ticket prices. That's what you're going to go to, right? And so you must have your own experience, not only because you know where your clients are going, but also because it helps you do your own work so that you can be more present and more available psychologically, emotionally, spiritually for your clients. I talk about this a lot in the course. It's integral, super important to have that experience before you're serving medicine.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So thank you so much for this, Sunny, and thank you so much for the work you do. And it's personally been life-changing for me, your work. And so I just want to remind folks that this is an incredible opportunity to deepen your own training, whether you're a licensed clinician or a guide or aspiring to do either, or whether you're just someone who's really interested in this work and your own personal experience with it, and you want to understand and go deeper, even to sort of self-facilitate on your own journeys. But this is really an in-depth professional training, and a really unique opportunity to do that for that very, very low price you see down there below. And we're going to be following up with you, but this course, it's a live cohort. You're going to be going through it with a cohort of fellow practitioners, and so it's coming up soon. So now's the time to jump in. And this is really an investment. This is not an expense. This is a very moderate investment in what is so important. If we're interested in involved in this work, we're really investing in our ability to do this work ethically and with wisdom and discernment. And so I really encourage people. I mean, I think I'm sure if you're still here with us, whether you're here with us or whether you're watching the recording of this, it's unmistakable the depth and wisdom in Sonny's work. So I really encourage you to leap in and make this investment and join us for this course. So again, thank you very much, Sonny.
Thank you, Fleet. It was a pleasure as always to see you and the team. Be
Wonderful.
well, everyone.
And thank you, Bridget. Thank you to everyone on the Therapy Wisdom team. And this course is being co-hosted by Therapy Wisdom and Heart Mind Institute. And we both really stand behind everything we bring to the world. And we couldn't be more proud and happier to bring Sonny's work to you.